guys, welcome to another customer self-service video. Today we're going to talk about duplicate supplier cleanup and why duplicate suppliers happen. I'm going to walk you through a live demo of the cleanup. It's kind of the simplest use case, but it gives you some ideas about how it can be done. So duplicate suppliers generally exist when they're added through supplier request form, be it in SLP or supplier registration, and then they're also pushed from the ERP. The ERP doesn't include the Ariba ID, and so Ariba doesn't know that the ERP is pushing data for the same supplier. So obviously the first step is to make sure that data sync happens. It can also happen for a variety of other reasons. Basically, any two of these items occur, it's going to create a duplicate. When a supplier self-registers, if another person at that supplier doesn't understand that they've registered and registers themselves again, then it's going to create a duplicate. We've put some steps in place now about the domain. So if it's coming from the same domain name, we'll actually pop up a message and say, hey, you already have an account, and prevent them, or at least send notification to the person that creates or manages their Ariba network account, some things like that. So there's actually more functionality that's been recently released in Q4 of 2019 that helps with that. But if they self-register, they register again, creates a duplicate. If you manually create it with a similar name, maybe you didn't know that Blue Cross Blue Shield or somebody was BCBS, whatever it is, it'll create a duplicate. If there's mergers and acquisitions, two companies become one, then now you have duplicates in your system. And as I've already spoken about, the ERP data push without the Ariba ID. So you've already created an Ariba ID, sent out their supplier registration, collected information. Then you decided that you were going to set them up in your ERP for payment transactions. And then the ERP didn't, when they pushed these vendor over to Ariba, they didn't include the Ariba common ID, and so it creates a duplicate. That's actually been mostly resolved if you're running SLP now with the CIG integration, where you kick that entire process off through Ariba. It automatically syncs that common ID with SAP for those of you on SAP environments. So now I'm going to actually show you how to kind of merge records together. In this case, I have a SLP created vendor that I called the SCV, and then an ERP created vendor called the ECV. Again, this is really the simplest solution if your ERP created vendor does not have any PO or invoice transactions against it. This is the simplest solution, the best solution, etc. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the SLP created vendor, go to Actions, Edit, go to Partition Supplier, choose Relink from another common supplier. We're going to choose the ERP created vendor. Now keep in mind, these names normally would be the same because it's the same vendor or similar enough that it shouldn't be quite like a completely different vendor. It's going to be the same vendor because it's duplicated. You're going to select this. That now links the ERP created vendor to the one that has all the registration information. That's why this is the simplest method. You don't have to ask them to reassociate anything, etc. In theory, the ANID here should move as well. So if I go to my supplier location, it already has the ANID associated with it if it was, etc. Now in this particular case, we're going to save this. That now links that. Now in the ERP, you're going to also need to put in the Ariba ID, right? This buyer underscore number. Usually it's an ACM underscore number, or potentially it could be a VDR number. And so you're going to add that to your ERP so that when your ERP creates that vendor again, it links all the ERP data to this common supplier. Now we've basically moved the partition supplier over. If we click on the ERP created vendor, you'll notice the partition's now gone. We're going to go and deactivate this vendor. So now I've deactivated this vendor. It's no longer in the system. That is the cleanest, simplest way to do it. And that really only works, I would say, if you don't have transactions. If you have transactions, the issue is that if you have a PO issued, when you try to invoice that PO, it won't allow it'll error out on you saying that the partition doesn't exist or the common supplier doesn't exist. And so it really only works if there are no open POs or open invoices. Some people prefer to close all the POs and close all the invoices out, get them all paid, move it, and just recreate any open POs. That's an option. The other thing that is an option is you can move the supplier registration information and ANIDs from the SLP created vendor over to the ERP created vendor and deactivate the Ariba created vendor or SLP created vendor. That's a little bit more complex with having to move contacts over and the supplier information over. And so this is the simplest method if it's available to you. But again, it will potentially lock up any transactions that you have. So, and obviously, if there were contracts or sourcing events, you would need to move those over as well. But it is possible to do this, to do supplier cleanup so that you're running one vendor record, and it's a lot cleaner overall. So hopefully you found this video helpful. Thanks for watching, and more to come.